Well, on Tuesday, voters in St. Johns County approved two taxes for education. At the same time, Duval is juggling school closures and a multi-million dollar, even billion-dollar deficit. Here to discuss the state of First Coast schools are two reporters who've been following both situations closely. Megan Mallicoat, education reporter for Jacksonville Today. Hey, Megan.
Good morning, Nan.
Also, Noah Hertz, Jacksonville Today reporter focusing on St. Johns County. Hi, Noah.
Hi, good morning.
So, what was the big news out of Tuesday's election in St. Johns County, Noah?
So I would be remiss to not point out that there's a new member on the school board, and that was something big. But I will say that the big exciting result out of the election on Tuesday night was that voters approved in St. Johns County to extend the half-cent sales tax that funds school improvements and capital improvements and whatnot for another 10 years, as well as approved a completely new 1 mil property tax that is going to specifically fund teacher salaries, teacher retention, and those kinds of efforts within St. John's.
St. John's had enormous voter turnout, well over 80%, which was, what among the highest in the state. St. Johns County is a very red county and typically pretty anti-tax.
Yeah, I think I had a conversation with the superintendent the night about an hour after polls closed when it looked, all the precincts weren't even in and it was still decisive enough that it had definitely passed. And he was elated. It was really interesting talking to him because I even said that. I said, I don't think it's unfair to say this is a very red county, and it's a county where I would say that most people in ordinary circumstances would be pretty much disposed to say no to any new tax that the government is proposing. And you had to get at least some of those people on board if they were going to get as big of a margin as they did with this one. And the thing he said to me was that, he thought that they made their appeal strong enough that the quality of life in St. Johns County that people enjoy is in part because of the schools. And if they can't fund the schools, if there aren't enough teachers, if they aren't able to build more schools, then what's going to happen to that quality of life? And that was really the argument that the school board was making going into the election.
I also looked back at a story that you did in August on the same subject. And, they decided to put this on the November ballot instead of the primary ballot. And I wonder if that was strategic in terms of expecting that the turnout for the primary, because it's such a red county, would be weighted towards people who might be even more anti-tax.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I think because in St. John's in the primary, the turnout was around 30%, as 30% of the county's registered voters, whereas, yeah, you said in the general, we got 86% thereabouts of registered voters in St. John's, which is really incredible. And really, really incredible that people really, as he said, like stepped up for the schools in this way. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Megan, how did the elections shake out for Duval County? What were some of the things happening on Tuesday and then just kind of surrounding Tuesday? Because there's so much happening.
It's been a big week for Duval schools. There was one school board election left on Tuesday because it had been in the primary with three candidates and then came to the general for a runoff. And so Reggie Blunt won his election against Hank Rogers. But it came at the same time as the school board's decision to close schools on Monday night, in a meeting that was very late, lasted until about midnight. Um, they had six schools up for a potential closure, and the school board decided to close three of them and then postpone the closure of the remaining three until the next school year because there was some community concerns that needed to be worked out, and the school board didn't want to rush into the closure.
And so this is a little bit of an opposite situation as we're seeing in St. Johns County.
Mhm.
NOAA's reported that they're going to be using this tax to hire hundreds of teachers and fill vacancies. Um, Duval is seeing this attrition that really is kind of hollowing out some of its core city or urban schools.
Yeah, the two districts could not be more different in that regard. That St. John's problem is that there's way too many students and the schools are way overcrowded. Whereas Duval is saying, there's under enrolled schools to the degree where they're having to close some. And St. John's has seen kind of this a bit of an attrition of teachers towards Duval because Duval has done things in the past to attract teachers, and St. John's is just so crowded and it comes in with its own issues that it's kind of sent some of the teachers over there.
Mhm.
So the two issues that we're talking about today are certainly related in the two counties, but they come from very different perspectives.
And so the school district has been pretty hard-nosed about looking at these school closures. They are looking at a massive deficit. They have real concerns about what that could mean for their own autonomy, but they also did respond to a very emotional appeal, from students. Tell
Yes,
us about that.
yeah. So they had originally proposed also to close the Young Men's, Young Women's Leadership Academy um, magnet program at Eugene Butler Middle School. And in a public hearing about a week before the vote on Monday, um, parents, community members, and even a bunch of students came out to just basically plead with the board to not close their program. So the board ended up actually removing that item from the agenda even before the vote. So, and then they said it's not going to come back anytime soon, and they are like recruiting a sixth grade class for the coming school year, which seems to indicate that they plan to keep the program going.
Like, what was so persuasive about their presentation? Because obviously there have been a lot of appeals from people representing community schools, parents who have kids in those schools saying these are essential elements of our community. You know, if you close them, it's really going to fundamentally change not only how our kids are educated, but also resources for family members and just a sense of community.
hmm So I think one of the most persuasive things was honestly the perspective of the students, just from watching the things that came out, plus to see the way that these uh, community members advocated for their school was very persuasive. And really, if you think back several months, several schools advocated effectively because there were other schools on the proposed closure list too over the summer. You had your Fishweir and your Holiday Hill and your John Stockton and Atlantic Beach and a whole bunch of other schools that formed these advocacy groups that effectively, you know, made their case and came off the proposed closure list. The difference here was, in part, that there wasn't as much time to make the case because the list wasn't finalized for the closures until I think it was October 1st. It was the very beginning of October anyway. Um, and so then set off this like flurry of impact meetings with the schools that were going to be affected, and there just wasn't nearly as much time for these community schools to make their case. But in the case of this magnet program, they took the time that they had and used it well.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we are talking about schools and updates and elections in St. John's and Duval County. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at wjct.org. I'd like to take a call from Linda in Mandarin. Good morning, Linda. Go ahead.
Good morning. I don't know if you guys have any answers to this, but I remember when Superintendent Green was in, I thought we had two tax referendums. One was for, funding for structures, and the other was for teachers' salary increase. I just got my property tax bill, and 40% of it is due to schools. There are 4 different entries: discretionary, capital outlay, voter approved, and schools local. And I have no understanding. If we approve for teacher salaries and teacher nutrition, where is that money going? Is that a slush fund now? And for capital outlay, if they're closing these schools, which are these older schools we're going to repair, is that money going to then float down to charter schools that are newer and privately owned? Where would I get these answers if you guys don't have it? I just don't understand this.
Well, Linda, I think let's take them one by one. I mean, I think the answer is yes to a lot of those, right?
A lot of those.
We did pass these taxes.
Right.
And they are going to certain specified needs, but times have changed, I guess, since those promises were made.
Yes, and so I think that's important to remember here is that a couple of notable things happened in the interim since that legislation was passed with Dr. Green. Is one thing that happened was the sales tax that the district initially expected to get a much higher percentage of. The state passed a law that said they have to share it with charter schools at a higher percentage. And so what the state had budgeted in their, projections to receive from this tax is now cut by some dramatic percentage that means that they're not going to be able to accomplish with it what they had intended to accomplish. And then with the school closures, they are expecting to save, for the 3 that they're going to close this coming school year, that was Chairman Darrell Willey at the school board meeting on Monday asked for specific figures, like how much will it save to close schools A, B, and C. In total, for the 3 that were chosen, it's about $3.3 million for the coming school year. And so, whereas the district has said, these closures are going to be a great way to save the money. The schools are already under enrolled. This is a way we can save money without impacting personnel. Well, there's still $97 million left because the budget shortfall is projected to be about $100 million.
So it's like 3.3 million out of 100 million.
Yeah. So another thing to remember is that there's been some COVID era funding that the district has been receiving for 4 different fiscal years now, and that expired at the end of September. And so I think it was 330 some odd million, I believe, that the district has received since 2020. And so as construction costs have risen, and as everybody can remember over the last several years how groceries cost more, everything costs more. So the school district is not immune from that. And so as the school district's costs have increased, some of it has we haven't noticed the impact of it yet because the COVID funding has helped to bridge that gap. And
Mm,
then also the district has been tapping into its savings account basically. Um, but it doesn't have that account
way
is
down.
bottomed out, and the COVID era funding stopped. And so if you'll remember too, last summer Superintendent Dana Krisner at the time had said, hey, that 700 jobs might be on the line in order to make up that deficit. Um, and the outcry from the community caused the district to look for ways to not make that happen. And so they kind of scrapped that plan for this school year, but the deficit is still there.
It
So
exists.
yeah, it exists.
Yeah. I think people are surprised, Noah, by how much money school districts actually do claim. You guys have done some reporting about, concerns in St. Johns County about the fact that the school district budget dwarfs the county's budget. Basically, the county's budget is like 1.2 billion and the district's is 1.5 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, and people, I think, are just surprised by that fact. It's not uncommon. I think the same is true in Duval, where
Mhm.
the school district's budget is over 3 billion and the city's budget is about 2.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is something that I said to the superintendent one of the times that we talked is I said like, look, one of the things I'm seeing is like people are so confused as to how an entire county's government can be dwarfed by the school district. And the thing he said to me was like, look, it's apples and oranges. It's too hard to compare because schools have so many operating costs. You know, county governments have to run a lot of things, but one thing that they don't have to run as much of are big buildings on big plots of land that have hundreds of employees in those buildings, you know? And so, and on top of that, then got all the kids coming inside the buildings. But I mean, listening to you talk about all the issues in Duval, it's just fascinating because, like you said, St. John's could not be any more different. I
Could
mean,
not be more
th-
different.
they can't build schools fast enough in St. John's
Correct.
County because, the big complaint in St. John's County when you talk to parents is, I don't want my kid to be in a portable. Like, this is ridiculous. Why is my kid in a portable? Why does my kid have to go to this bus stop because there aren't enough bus drivers? Like, it is incredible listening to what they are going through, especially since, one of the elements of what was passed on Tuesday was the extension of the half-cent sales tax that was initially passed in 2016. And, the school board has touted the success of the half-cent sales tax. They were able to use it to partially or completely build 4 schools, expand a bunch of others, improve their intercom system, school security, all this stuff. And so the pitch they were making to voters there was like, look, we know we need new schools, but if you don't approve this, we are not sure how we're going to fund those new schools. And like you said, when you see a budget that high, there was some concern from voters, like, where the heck's all the money going then? But yeah.
I just want to take a quick call from Tom on the west side. Tom, just very briefly, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to say that there needs to be some sort of plan to deal with the school buildings that they're closing because where I live, there's one very nearby that's just sitting vacant, and my concern is it's going to be a target for vandalism and crime.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks. And that is a reality, Megan.
it is. And the district has projected when they're going to demolish a lot of these buildings, but it'll be a few years, and it costs, I think, about a $500,000 on average to demolish a school building so that it doesn't become, I mean, just an empty building in poor shape in the neighborhood. But then there's been some concern too that I've heard of charter schools coming in and wanting those buildings, which is a large can of worms to get into about how that would then impact the district's enrollment in those neighborhoods.
Yeah. Um, I also just want to, before we wrap, talk about the makeup of the Duval County School Board versus the St. Johns County School Board. This is a true conservative majority, Megan, and they've really been influenced by some outside groups like that have been supported by the governor. Moms for Liberty is a supporter of at least 3, right?
I th 5 now,
5,
5, mhm.
5
So
of 7.
5 of 7, and so yes, absolutely, and, Moms for Liberty came in, I believe it was first noted in the 2022 election and tried to, get their candidates into school boards across the state of Florida, and Ron DeSantis then this election cycle made it one of his primary goals to get candidates that are friendly to his goals into, um, school boards across the state as well. And we saw that in Duval with the local GOP, is that they were very strategic about it.
And that's real unusual for a large urban school district nationally to be so conservative. But Noah, conservative St. Johns County really hasn't seen a similar activism on that level.
Yeah, I mean there were definitely some examples of that in past elections. I know the challenger that one of the members of the school board had in a recent election had that, but this year it's a very conservative school board, but it's a very conservative school board that has so much other things that they have to focus on that culture war, all of these things that we're seeing at the national and the state level are just really not as prominent these days on
Yeah.
the St. Johns County School Board.
Well, Jacksonville Today's Megan Mallicoat, Noah Hertz, thank you so much for being on today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
Ann.
you.